Hello everyone, welcome to Red Summer Holdings, a real estate partnership comprising of 8 owners, Tochi, myself Zoe, Ramad, Charles, Ikechi, Chima, Innocent, and IK. Here we discuss the evolution of our business, which shows you how group economics can be successful in regards to real estate. If you believe there is value in this information, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. With that being said, let's get to the content you've all been waiting for.
All right, so this is that list that we started off, or I started off last week going through as a checklist from basically the idea of investing in a specific place to closing. And to run through it really quickly, I use Bigger Pockets to identify a real estate agent that I want to work with. I spoke with that agent to get an idea, to explain to them what my investment goals are and understand the local market. And the local market in this scenario is Cleveland, Ohio. And through that agent, I obtained access to the MLS so that I can start favoriting properties on the MLS and pretty much open the discussion between myself and the agent on specific properties. Ultimately identified a property that I was interested in purchasing in. That's number 4. Reached out to a lender to get pre-qualified, because in the Cleveland, Ohio market, as well as in any other, relatively hot market, you're going to want to submit an offer with some sort of proof that you'll be able to close on the deal in order to strengthen your offer and hopefully get it accepted. Then number 6, submitted the offer again with the proof of funds letter supplied by the lender that I plan on using. Get the offer accepted, reach out to the agent for recommendations on property managers and other real estate specialists that you need to get to closing. So that's going to be, inspection people, title companies, contractors if need be, and then work with the inspector. And so now we're getting to the point where we left off 2 weeks ago. I finished 1 through 8, and I was working on the final one. So the next one would be to work with the inspector to identify what time the inspection is going to be, which took place, and we can go over that in a second. Confirm with the property manager, and this isn't something that's required, but something that I wanted to do this time around because I feel like it would add some value. So confirm with the property manager whether they or one of their contractors can accompany the inspector in order to put together, a rough sort of napkin list of things that may need to be fixed early on in the operating process. Next, complete the inspection and simultaneously obtain estimates from the contractor on the repairs from the list that they supplied. Get some of the financials, so that's the trailing 12 months, the rent roll, and if there were any capex, capital expenditures in the last 12 months, get that from the seller too, just to understand the structural health of the property as well as the financial health. The next thing would be to schedule the appraisal, and that's something that's done on the lender side, because at least my lender, they require an appraisal for the property. And then work with the lender after the appraisal to finalize loan terms, negotiate with the seller. And that's at 14 now, and we'll discuss this in a bit, it probably moves up to, a little earlier in the process for the sake of coming to a final price, and then finalize loan and prepare for closing. So that's just a quick review of the, rough checklist. Obviously, every purchase is going to have different nuance to it, but more often than not, you'll hit all of these, junctures on the road to closing. So to move forward, I can say that, 9 was done, 10 was done, 11 was partially done. Again, we'll discuss a little bit more about that later. 12's done, 13 is still pending, and 14 is done, which is why I mentioned it's probably be moved up, and obviously 15 is pending. So that takes me to a quick spreadsheet that I put together to sort of outline what I'm dealing, or put on paper what I'm dealing with in terms of the financials of the property. If you remember from last time, I can even, just because it's going to be a new video, I imagine. So let's take a look at the property itself, just to put a picture to words. Oh, that's the wrong one. Not this one. Here we go. So that's the property itself, listed at 117. We went over this a couple weeks ago. 2 units, 3 by 1. Don't need to go into the details, but that's the property. And so over the course of the last 2 weeks, after the inspection, getting that report, and also having the potential property manager I plan on using go out with their contractor to check out the property during the inspection, they came back with a list of what may need to be fixed within the first year. And I purposefully told them to give me, an exhaustive list of everything that could possibly need to be fixed so that I can come up with conservative estimates in terms of the cash outlay that I would have in the first year. And so this is the list they came back with, as well as the estimates on each line item. And then just to be ultra conservative, I added a miscellaneous line item, which is just 25% of the total amount. Because, when you're doing any sort of even, small construction projects, unless you're, an A1 contractor that has, plenty of time and experience in the business, chances are there are going to be some surprises and you want to budget for it. So I just added a 25% miscellaneous piece to sort of come out to a total amount for if, again, I wanted to fix everything in year 0, day 1, before any revenue. So that's sort of explains this box here. And if you remember, one of the units is vacant, the top unit, and I highlighted the ones in red that would probably need to be done before someone can move in. And then also the roof, because when I spoke with the inspector, they said that, yeah, you're gonna wanna probably look at that roof within the first year. It's not something that's incredibly urgent, but it's prudent to at least have a plan to get it done. So that's why I added that for the first year as well. And that total comes out to what I consider the up unit make ready total at 10,000. And so, and a few other things here. This is just to represent the current revenue of the property and what the market is said to be by the property manager, as well as Rentometer, as well as current rental listings on Zillow. And this is sort of the finalized numbers we'll get after we go through all of this here. The closing costs are pretty straightforward. There are points on the loan, so that's why those points are involved there. That's the appraisal, that's the inspection, some legal costs that go with it. And again, miscellaneous. What I did here is I just took 1% of the loan amount, just because, there's always like those title fees and all sorts of other fees that you see on a closing statement that you would never be able to, get all of them down unless you work in that industry, the title industry. So I just made it easy on myself and made it 1% of the loan amount, maybe less, maybe more, but I just want to account for it, at least in part. And so if you remember from the list, they had it listed at 117, but because, and this was on that list of things to do, because I got this sort of laundry list of need to do's, I was able to negotiate the price down. And so what I wanted was to bring the price to 110. But what I ended up doing is, which would be a $7,000 discount. But what I ended up doing is taking the price down to the list price down to 113 and getting a credit at closing of 3. So it's 7,000, but broken up into those two pieces to sort of give the seller some in negotiations while I actually get what I want in reality. And so, yeah, so it's basically 110, but it's 113 with the credit at closing with 3 to cover some of these closing costs. And those are, here for the sake of calculation. And you'll see the difference, it's 2,359. And then the CapEx is brought in here, where this would be, if I were to, fix everything right off the bat, this would be, if I were to just fix enough to get that top unit, again, off of estimates. You know, they always say never trust the number that ends at zero. So, I mean, it's not going to end up being this, but it's just something to go off of for the purpose of underwriting. So that's if I were just to do a light renovation for the top unit. And then if I were to not necessarily renovate the roof early on and just do what was needed for the interior to cover the top unit, it'd come down to 2,700. And toggling this number, you know, from ultra conservative to conservative to optimistic gives me this what will be the equity required, which is the down payment plus the capex year one plus closing costs minus the credit to closing. And so that's where I get that this is basically what's going to come out of my pocket to get the property under my management and ownership, and also get the vacant unit rented. Any questions at that point, so we can like sort of break it up, or any comments to clarify?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
So when you negotiated the price down, was that just based on, hey, seller, I've noticed, through inspection that through my contractor that, I have maybe $10,000 worth of work I need to do. Is it possible to get that discount? Is that what you based it off of?
Um, uh, Pretty much, more or less. I mean, basically what I said is, hey, look, after the inspection and after my contractor went in, we noticed a lot of, deferred maintenance, mainly the roof, that wasn't disclosed in any way, shape, or form. So we deem it fair that we get, a deduction on a reduction on the price. We're willing to work with you on how that reduction will play out, but a reduction is necessary. I basically told my agent, look, my number is going to be 110. I'm not necessarily interested in, going back and forth and me saying 110, they say 115, I say 113 or whatever. My number is 110. If they're interested, we can sort of massage how we do it, but 110 is going to be what it comes out to. They agreed with it, and so we were able to move forward. But to answer your question, the basis of how I was able to even begin that negotiation process was because I was, I understood what needed to be done in the property pretty early on, and they didn't disclose it in their listing in any way, shape, or form.
That's a really dope strategy that we should definitely use in the future. That's dope.
Yeah,
And I
it's
was,
interesting.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say like a similar thing I saw like on that IG link, the Ace Investments, that right? This guy talked. He was on Bigger Pockets once, and he pretty much talks about a similar thing where he goes on the looks at the price, goes on the back end, and buys a pending inspection, and like does subtraction after inspection is done on this. So similar to what you just did. But yeah, I think this is really really dope, and the way you also had the spreadsheet set up was good.
And I'll put this in the drive once we're done here. But one of the things, or two things. So the first thing is that at least in Cleveland, evidently during the contract period, after an inspection takes place, you have 3 days to release that inspection contingency from the contract and then move forward with the contract. I didn't know that going in, but it's good that I had the contractor go with the inspector and get this list basically, almost automatically after the inspection was done, because it gave me much more time to sort of use concrete, not concrete numbers, but an actual list of what needs to be done, as opposed to just estimating, okay, chances are, I'm gonna have to spend 10% of the purchase price on renovations. I know exactly what needs to be renovated, and I knew it as soon as the inspection was done, even from hundreds of miles away. And being under the constraint of 3 days to release that contingency, it was all the more important to get this information quickly and be able to make a decision quickly. And then my second point I was going to make is that I sort of fell like backwards into this strategy where in my first property that I purchased, I was actually there during the inspection with the real estate agent as well, who was also an investor. And, we noticed during the inspection, like, okay, this unit is going to take at least, 10K and I mean, it's occupied, but it's going to most likely end in an eviction, and it's going to take at least 10K to get it to any level of rentability. And I had no plan of actually doing sort of this process, but I did it sort of naturally because I was there. And I'm not there here, so just having that previous experience and knowing that there's a good chance, especially with a very old property that's managed by like a mom and pop manager, there's going to be deferred maintenance. Understanding what that deferred maintenance early on is going to be is key to being able to negotiate on price, or just having confidence and be able to go forward. So that's pretty much the sort of the negotiation piece.
Hey, I got one more question actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned your number was 110.
Yeah.
But you came down to 113 and then took, I guess, another 3 in credit.
Mm-hmm.
What's the benefit of doing that? What's the difference? Like, why would the seller agree to that? Like, why does he need 113 as the number on paper? I'm just trying to understand that.
I'm not exactly, and honestly, I tried to understand it myself, but I'm not exactly sure how that necessarily helps them. In fact, in my opinion, it'd probably make more sense to take the purchase price even farther lower for tax purposes.
For sure, right? That's what I was thinking,
as a seller.
Gains,
yeah, because I mean, on paper your gains are less, but maybe they don't necessarily have that much cash on hand to give me the credit on the back end. So if they were to take the price lower, it'd be 110, and they'd have to give me a $7,000 check essentially right at close. Maybe they didn't have the cash on hand or something like that. But yeah, it's a mystery to me, honestly. If it were me, I don't want the purchase price on paper to be as low as possible for tax purposes, and just cut a check on the back end between myself and the buyer. But everybody has their motivation. I didn't necessarily get a chance to speak to the seller, which would be cool, but I don't know how I'd be able to put that together, going through not only mine but the seller's agent to actually speak to the seller. But yeah, it's a mystery to me, honestly.
Okay, well, the mystery continues then.
Yeah.
Quick question on the interest rate. Is that like the going rate for kind of investment properties in that region?
Oh yeah, so that's a great segue. I was going to start going into the financing side of it. So I would say it depends on what sort of loan you're getting, right? And we sort of brushed over this before, where like there's a pros and cons of commercial versus conventional loans. This is commercial loan on a small property. So the loan balance, I mean, you can see it, there's 90K. That's not very much for a lender, right? So they're going to charge a lot more for a low balance commercial loan. And it's sort of the give and take of time versus money, right? So at 7.26% and 2.5 points, that sounds extremely expensive, right? And I mean, it amortizes over 30 years. So it's not like something that's going to be onerous in terms of the month-to-month cost, but it's more expensive than a conventional loan, to answer your question, or even most commercial loans for larger properties. Yeah. But the rationale, at least for me, and this is always going to be like a personal or business decision, depending on the operators and what their goals are. I'm more interested in getting the property under my control than getting a super low rate at these levels. And I'll show you why using some of the math. So here's the monthly payment, or here's the annual payment, right, on the loan with these terms. So basically, you can see here, I'll just double click it. So the payment's going to be, on 90K, the interest rate's 7.26%, and it's amortized over 30, right? So that's 617 is what it comes out on a monthly basis, principal and interest. If I were to lower this to what I would consider, the conventional rates now, or commercial rates, let's say 4%, that lowers the payment. What was that? That was 617 and then it's 431.
Yeah.
So that lowers the payment by $186. Let's call it $2K per year, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to save that $2,000 per year, but the way I see it, if I were to go through the process, and this is again for me personally because of like my student loans and the interest I have to pay on that, and my general debt to income, personally, it would take either me going through a very long process of trying to do like a FHA or any other conventional loan and submitting all of my information, that being tax returns, proof of employment, yada yada yada, to get to the point where I can get that 4% paper, or I would have to pay down a significant amount of my student loans out of the free cash that I have in my bank account, which basically it makes me on paper to an underwriter more loanable, but in reality it really takes down my buying power because I would have allocated a lot of cash to paying down debts as opposed to acquiring assets. And so that $2,000 on an annual basis simply is not worth the diminishment of buying power on my end. And so with that being the case, I just decided to go with the loan that I can get. Here, let me see, let's go back. Which is going to cost me $2K more, but according to my pro forma, I spend as much as possible to get the property in place and up to market. I'm still making 12% cash on cash, or 15% cash on cash if I don't in years I don't have repairs. And the math works in such a way that, say my student loans are, they cost me 5% annually. Well, I would always forego paying down a loan that would cost me 5% annually to invest in an asset that makes me 12% annually, because I'm making double on my money than I would make by simply saving the 5%. So I mean that sort of goes into a lot of like the math of it, but ultimately it's just personal preference.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, it comes down to like, it's taking that into account. This is like your personal finances.
Mm-hmm.
And doing and adjusting it. Yeah, that number just seemed pretty high. I mean, I think it's gonna come down to,
I would say
the math works out. I mean, it's still more in than out.
And I would say like the rate is high, the points are high, but the dollars aren't, right? So like, again, it's that $2K that I'm spending extra annually. Again, I probably won't have this loan forever, but until I refinance out of it, I'm spending extra $2K annually. Plus, there's the $2K in points that I'm spending. But on an annual basis, I should be getting cash flow of $5K. So like in the first year, I'll cover those points, and then over the course of following years, I'll be making more than I'm losing because of the rate.
Here's a question for you. Let's say you had a co-signer on the loan. Let's say somebody else. Let's say your dad or your mom or whoever, someone with like strong credit history, not as many, not as much debt. And so they'll co-sign the loan with you, and you just say, you know what, you'll pay them back, percentage of your income on the property, right? It's the co-investor. Do you think the bank could have been amenable to that plan at a more favorable interest rate?
Possibly. I mean, it's always up to the lender ultimately what they're comfortable lending at. And again, on this particular example, the lower amount caused for a higher rate because the bank needs to make money on the money that they're loaning out. But I'm sure, obviously, if the DTI was much lower, I'd probably get a better rate. But yeah, I mean, co-signers, especially those with stronger credit histories, tend to lower rates in general. But it's hard to say exactly how low it'll get because that's ultimately up to the lender.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to because when it comes to for us to do this as a group, I wonder. I mean, I wonder because all our calculations were based on much lower rates. in terms of how we set up our initial spreadsheets, like what number we'll be comfortable going with. And if there's 8 of us, will that make us more likely to get a lower rate than less? Yeah, right. Yeah, because us as a group, we're not making the personal finance decision. We're just going for like the best possible terms. So I'm just wondering how that will like play out when it comes to us versus an individual
at
investor.
like 6% or something, so it's not that far off, if I'm not mistaken.
Really?
Yeah, I think the calculate like on the calculator was like 6%.
Yeah. It's well, FHA loans are going for like 3.2, 3.3 right now.
Yeah, but you can't do an FHA as a business.
I know. I was just saying the, yeah.
And then
I mean,
I wanted to say that is hot fire that IK said. He said, I'm more interested in getting the house under my control than the interest rate. Spoken like a true businessman.
Well, I just figure like, because I can tell you that on my first property, the rate that I ended up going with, because I was even a worse lending perspective, was like 9%. But I mean, I figured, you know, the property is paying for the renters are paying for the mortgage. As long as I'm making more money than I'm spending, yeah, I'd like to make more of a spread between the rents and the fixed and variable costs, but that's just not in play for me right now. So I'm going to do the deal anyway. And it ended up being a deal in one of the, you know, the hotter markets in the country. So if I had foregone that simply because I was only making 200 a door instead of 300 a door, I'd have been kicking myself. So I would prefer to just have the property under my control under unfavorable terms. 5-10 years down the line, I refinance and the rates are better and I still own the property. That's the way I see it.
The math works, plain and simple. That's good.
And so that segues us. I mean, we pretty much talked about the financing side of it, which encompasses, you know, like these boxes here. And then going to some of the operating side. Right now, the property on paper is underwater because there's only one renter at 650, which gives you, you know, 7,800 as a top line revenue. This is just a baked in number here. It's just 5%, which technically, I mean, it should be 100% right now or 50% because one of the units is empty, but that's just for the sake of underwriting. The management is going to be $115 a month flat. And that comes out to $1,380 for the year. Property taxes right now are listed at $2,550, but I imagine after I purchase it, it's reassessed. It's going to go higher. It usually does. So I just underwrite $3,000. Insurance, I have to sign the insurance quote at some point today, but it's going to come out to $1,193. Utilities, I put 125. Actually, I'll bring up. And that reminds me, another thing is that I was able to have a stronger negotiating stance because they didn't really give me the full financials of the property. All I got basically was the P&L for the last year. They didn't have a lease for the current tenant. They actually have to draft a month-to-month lease just so I can submit it to the lender. And they had no CapEx. So I had the ability to assume that nothing was done, which chances are is the truth because, you know, it's a pretty big list here. So that gave me better, you know, negotiating stance on the property. So I'm just pulling up what they did give me, which is basically the P&L for the last year. And I just brought this up. I'll make it a little small, it's a little big for me. I just brought this up to show the utilities were kind of sporadic, but if you average it out, including what looks like blanks, I'm thinking they paid extra or paid late or something like that for those blank months or that blank month, it'll come out to about 125 a month, which actually this should be a year. So hold on. So 125 times 12. All right, so that's that. Repairs and maintenance, that's just a percentage of the revenue. So it's a placeholder basically. So again, it's a negative earning property, obviously, because one of the units is empty and the other one's below market. But if you come up to market or pro forma prices, revenue and expenses, you're looking at almost a 10% cash on cash if you consider repairs and maintenance, and above if you don't. And that's, again, if I were to fix everything in year one, which more likely than not I won't. I like to schedule this sort of stuff out, especially if it's not, imperative to be done. And if you do sort of like the light work, your spread is between 12 and 16 cash on cash. And again, this is year one. Obviously, once this is done once, you would think that it's not going to have to get done again anytime soon. And then if we're going even lighter with scheduling at the roof, the returns get a little better. So that's pretty much that. I mean, at this stage, what I'm waiting for is the appraisal to come back. And then it's more or less basically closing the deal out with the financing side, getting that month-to-month lease submitted to the underwriter, making sure the insurance binder is complete and sent to the underwriter, and that's pretty much it. I'm set to close hopefully by this time next week.
Do you feel like overall, like the process was pretty smooth for you?
Well, I mean, quite frankly, I don't really have much to compare it to, except for the one building I bought before. It's smoother because when I was going in blind the first time. If I don't think I could be as brave as I was back then, but with a little bit of experience, I would say that I was surprised less. There's definitely differences in the markets, like that 3-day contingency thing. I had no idea that existed. Just some of the estimates here seemed a little high to me. And I actually spoke with a couple other contractors, and they were saying, like, I mean, we can do that for much cheaper. Some of the like cosmetic stuff here. So other than that, I mean, it hasn't been a terribly difficult process. As long as you are proactive with communication. Like I was able to like talk to the inspector for about an hour to sort of go over his report, because I mean, it's almost a different language, some of those reports. So I talked to him, and I found out he owns property nearby. I spoke with the real estate agent, pretty much every day for the last few weeks here. And the more you communicate with people during the process, the less you'll be surprised about. So I mean, usually it's about 30 days, right? So it's a month of extreme proactivity. And then once you get to the finish line, you can sort of dial it back and work at your own pace. But until then, you want to bother people more than not bother them. Like if you feel like if you feel like you're communicating too much, that's good, because that doesn't hurt you. When you communicate too little is when it hurts you.
Yeah, it's true. That's dope, man.
And okay, for your insurance, right? Did you using the same insurance agent that you have in your other property for this one, or did you just get a brand new one for Ohio?
No, I originally was thinking about using the same insurance agent, but when I spoke to my lender, actually, he was like, hey, it might be a good idea to use someone that's local. You tend to get better rates from a local agent. So with that advice, I reached out to my real estate agent, and asked her if she had any recommendations. Obviously she does, because she's a real estate agent and she's good at her job. So she sent me to a guy that is local to the area. And sure enough, the quote came back lower than that if I were to use the same agent I use in Phoenix.
How much or little did having purchased out of state already lend to your level of comfort with this whole process?
I would say 100%, because the process I went through to purchase in Phoenix, like I was nervous the whole way through, even though I was there on the ground looking at the property. It exists, it's standing. I've been in every bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen on the property, but still I was nervous because it was my first property, right? And this time around, knowing how little I physically did during that process of being there on the ground, sort of just following experts around, And yeah, I mean, critical thinking is important, and being able to sort of make decisions on the spot since you're there is important. But I was able to sort of replicate that with requesting videos and photos, not only from obviously the inspector, but also the agent as well as the contractor. So like I think that my lack of productivity in Arizona during the physical inspection process and everything that wasn't able to be done on the computer screen gave me, in a weird way, gave me confidence that I can do it pretty much anywhere, because my my skill set isn't going to be going through a property and actually touching each and every piece and making decisions because I can physically see something's wrong with the roof or something's not wrong with it. I can sort of lean on other people's expertise, double check that with a third party, and make a decision that is more around the math of it as opposed to the physical nature of things, if that makes sense. I don't know if that made much sense, but if it does.
Basically, you saw with the math. So your eyes were the numbers, and then
it's like, to make an analogy, like I'm not a good cook. So if I'm going to a nice restaurant, me sitting in the kitchen and helping the chef out isn't going to do much. But deciding which plate I can afford and which dish has like value to me as a consumer or as the future owner of that dish, I got much more confidence in myself at that. So basically what I'm saying is, like, allow pros that you trust to do their job, verify that job, and move on to things that you're actually good at. In that case, it'd be eating for me.
Nice analogy.
Thank you.
Nice.
and it's good if Vermont tells nice. Holy shit.
It's the yoga guru.
But that's pretty much it. I mean, we're pretty much up to date on that. Hopefully I can bring some good news by the next meeting and say it's closed.
You will, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Oh, quick question. So last question. What's the strategy? Is there like a strategy to find a renter for that upstairs unit? Or is it kind of up to the property manager? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, it's gonna be, and I've checked out like the property manager's site. They have like rental listings on their site. They put it on Zillow, they put it on Craigslist, and everywhere else that renters look for spaces. But yeah, that's mainly gonna be up to the property manager's discretion. Yeah. That's another scenario where it's like, look, I'm not necessarily good at marketing units. I'd like to have a hand in how it's photographed and how it's presented, but other than that, in terms of the actual marketing and the dollars that go to it, that's going to be up to you. There's a fee for them leasing it. It's half the first month's rent, but in that fee includes like the marketing, the photos and all that sort of stuff, the background checks of tenants. So that's credit history, eviction history, verifying they have a occupation that allows them to afford the unit. So all of the, the property management responsibilities that go around leasing a unit, they take care of. Yeah. Obviously, the final decision on the tenant is mine, but they produce candidates. And this property manager has, I think, like 800 units in the local area. So, I would imagine that they have the systems in place to efficiently pull in candidates for renting. It may be slow around this time of year due to weather and stuff like that, but they're going to be much better at it than I am in their local market, is how I see it figure out. And if they aren't, then I'll find another property manager to work with and move forward from there.
Yeah, I had a question. In getting the contractors and inspectors, was that through your agent? I don't remember if you said that or not. Was that through your agent, or did you just do your own independent research, or through Bigger Pockets and all of that?
Through the agent. So I got a list of contractors, handymen. My agent actually recently redid her roof, so she's going to have a roofer that I could speak to. But the property manager also has a network of contractors, handymen, and specialists that they work with. And then over time, I'll probably build my own network just as sort of like a fail-safe. And at this point, I would say my priority is getting work done quickly as opposed to cheaply so that I can get the property cash flowing. But over time, I'll start to do a little more research on the reliability of different contractors and the price points that they operate at to try to lower the CapEx and repair expenses even more. But early on, I just want to get the thing stabilized so that it's making money as opposed to losing money. So I'm willing to spend a little more on some of those repairs. And that's why I have that list at pretty much the highest prices and the most work. So I can say, okay, even if I spend $22,000 the first year, it'll still make a decent profit for me. So that makes me like, okay, you know, even if I do a horrible job at money management, I'll still make money. That's fantastic.
Okay. Thanks, IK. And
Yep.
We'll be looking for that update next meeting, my guy. You better have good news by force.
Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Peace.